Well, there you have it, folks. That is Dreamfall, The Longest Journey for PC. Okay, yeah, I'm not really sure how I feel at this point. It's been quite a ride indeed. There's certainly a ton of questions left unanswered. I'm actually kind of surprised that there are so many. It's very evident that they were gearing up for a sequel here, and as far as I know, that we haven't really seen anything in the way of plans towards that. So it's really difficult for me to totally render a solid, accurate opinion on the story, since I feel like we have just a bite of the story rather than the full story. And this is kind of like the equivalent of just reading The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, without access to either The Fellowship of the Ring or Return of the King. So I don't know. I have so many unanswered questions. It's hard not to walk away from this game with a feeling of disappointment, a feeling of disconcertedness, because they had all these plot threads developing, and we didn't get any real payoff to them. It's very similar to Lost, really. You know how on an episode of Lost they would answer 3 questions and then ask 9 more, and ultimately they just kept on going and many of these plot threads just went absolutely nowhere. So I have a very similar sensation to that right now, but I don't want that to taint the overall view of the game, because for a large part of the game I was very invested. Well, for pretty much the entire game, I was very invested in the story world, thanks to beautiful art direction, beautiful music, beautiful atmosphere, great characters, great and memorable characters, good writing, interesting dialogue, great voice acting. All these elements really drew me into the story world, and they got me interested in it. I just don't think that there's a real payoff to that. That's really unfortunate, because I don't want to sound like I'm coming across as an overall negative response toward this game. It's actually very positive. It really leaves me wanting more. Obviously there were a couple flaws within the game. The combat system was pretty clunky, but I was willing to forgive that, because I don't feel like they foregrounded it too much. Most of the game was about those adventure game elements, solving puzzles, participating in conversations, finding out more of the story, and those were really done well. The combat was a little clunky. I feel like the pacing was a bit off in some ways. I think perhaps we spent a little bit too much of the early game just kind of lackadaisically wandering around without any idea who the major players were. And so as a result, the ending feels very rushed. Now, I'm not sure how much of that might have to do with real-life budget constraints. Perhaps, this was a game that, maybe they intended to put much more into it at the end that would have explained a lot more of these questions that I have. But they simply ran out of time, ran out of money to do so. Which would explain why the first half of the game seems so much longer and slower paced, and then the last half of the game we start flying through like all these really major plot points with very little way to orient ourselves. I mean, pretty much from that climax, which I consider the start of the climax to be in the swamp, when Zoe and April and Kian all converge with each other. From there, we just fly at a breakneck pace, and we cover so much material that it's really difficult for me to parse. The whole idea of who Faith is, why she was created for this experimentation by Wadi Corp, who Helena Chang is. Apparently, that's Zoe's mom. Apparently, Reza's alive, but he's not alive. Apparently, Wadi Corp's Pete's has been assassinated, and that someone else has taken over his place. Still moving forward with the Dreamer. And back in the world of Arcadia, we have the tower. We still have this undreaming that we were never really introduced to. We only heard a little bit about it from the very beginning. So I'm left with so many questions, and